Welcome back to Unboxing OD. I'm your host, Kenneth Pearson, and I'm so glad that you're here. Each episode, we explore the human-centered heart of organizational development, what it looks like in action, what it feels like in motion, and how we navigate the spaces between challenge and change. And today's episode is a special one. I'm joined by a guest whose work and perspective offer a unique lens into the OD world. Whether you're new to this field or have been walking it for a while, I think you'll find something meaningful in our conversation. But before we dive in, let me take a moment to introduce her properly. So Dr. Victoria Mattingly, aka Dr. V, is an organizational psychologist, keynote speaker, and CEO of Mattingly Solutions, a woman-owned consulting firm that uses data and science to improve the human experience at work. She is the author of Inclusalytics. Am I saying that right?
Nailed it.
Yeah, Inclusalytics, and the forthcoming Act Like an Ally, Work with an Ally, which translate research into actionable strategies for building more inclusive workplaces. A mental health warrior, cancer survivor, alopecia casualty, and one of the 19% of women CEOs, Dr. V brings both lived experience and expert insight to every stage, classroom, and boardroom. And I am so excited to finally meet you. So I'm gonna say that I've been really looking forward to this conversation. As you were one of the people that got me really excited about the annual PsyUp conference in May. So, we were talking a little bit before this that, I'm relatively new to the IO field. Have been working in organizational development for about 5 years or so, but I've been following your journey, I guess I would say probably since February or so, and I've just been really looking forward to this conversation. So thank you so much for being here, and yeah, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'd love to start with something close to the heart of your work. So when you think about organizational psychology, not just in terms of productivity, but in terms of how people actually feel at work, how do you tend to describe its purpose? And if you don't mind sharing, what first pulled you into this field?
Yeah, so I graduated with my undergrad degree in psychology in 2008 when we were in the worst recession since the Great Depression. So not surprisingly, there weren't very many jobs available. So I was living in Portland, Oregon at the time, and I was like, if I have to bartend after just working my butt off for this degree, I'm gonna work at the fanciest, nicest restaurant in town and make all the money. And so that's what I did. And one day, these two IO psychologists walk into my bar and I ask them, what they're in town for. And they tell me that they're in town to help a current standing hospital retain their doctors and nurses because a shiny new hospital is opening up down the street. So they're trying to figure out what can they do to make the lives of these doctors and nurses better so they don't leave for the new hospital opening up. And I was like, hold the phone. There's a field where you can make people's lives in the workplace better and like you get paid for that and everyone's on board. Like, what is this field? So that's how I kind of got a preview of IO psychology. And then from there, I worked at the University of Portland State. I had an internship and then I went and got my PhD at Colorado State. And so to define industrial organizational psychology, which is a 10-syllable profession, which is why I lobbed off the industrial when I talk about myself. But IO psychology is the practice of using data and science to improve the human experience at work. So when I talk about my training, I say, I learn a lot of the same topics that you would learn in like an MBA program, but instead of learning it from the bottom line perspective, I'm learning it from a human-centric perspective. And so, how do we make sure we hire the best employees for roles based on their knowledge, skills, personality, abilities? How do we make sure that we have evidence-based training? So what we train people actually is on the right competencies and we measure the effectiveness of that training. How do we develop leaders to motivate people in the workplace using psychological principles? So I love IO psychology. And you mentioned PsyUp, the Society of IO Psychology. And I've been going to that conference for 12 years now. And it's just so great to be among 5,000 other IO psychologists nerding out over the latest trends in the workplace.
It's like just that don't have to explain what IO psychology is. So it always works out really well. Um, yeah, and I knew that you talked a little bit more about like the like the organizational psychology portion of it. So this year, I know we're just going to kind of go off on some other different tangents here sometimes too. So this year, I know that you had mentioned in a couple of your posts that you've been a speaker at PsyOp for many years, and this year you decided to take a step back and just be an attendee. How was that for you?
Was so wonderful to not have to run around like a chicken with my head cut off. And, everyone's like taking their presentations to the last minute and you're trying to corral your fellow presenters and you're not able to attend any sessions just as an attendee. I'd always do like 3 or 4 different sessions. So it was really nice to just kind of take the year off and just enjoy the conference and, go where I wanted to go or not go where I didn't want to go. And I did do one thing. I wasn't on the program, so it doesn't count. But I did do one thing, which was PsyOp's Got Talent. So I think it was the Friday night of the conference. They had a talent show, so I did participate in that. But I loved it, and my favorite part was when I posted about it. I said, the reasons why I wasn't participating this year on the formal program, but I also said if you're interested in being, put in my place, comment below and I'll recommend you. And a friend of mine got on 2 sessions because of that, because I was recommending him. So it was nice to pass the mic to other voices and give people other people the opportunity to participate.
Yeah, and I found that specifically with the with PsyOp that the networking and they're really the connections that you make at PsyOp and the people that you meet at PsyOp are just really authentic relationships and really it almost feels like everybody's there to kind of just help everybody out. I don't know if that's the case, but that was my experience with it. So you saying that specifically about the saying comment in the comment in the thread and I'll recommend you is like the perfect understanding of how PSYOP is and something that we're going to talk about here a little bit, that allyship. You have such a grounded way of talking about allyship. So not as something one person does for another, but as something shared. So a relationship, not a performance. That reframing of that is really so powerful. So where did that idea start to take root for you? And how do you think that shift in mindset might help workplaces move beyond performative allyship?
Yeah. So my dissertation I did in collaboration with a leadership development consulting firm, and it was a Men as Allies training program for male executives to help them be better allies to women in the workplace. And the TLDR is that you can train male executives to be better allies, and we measured that according to their subordinates, not according to themselves, because everyone thinks they're an ally, but it really matters. People are seeing you act like an ally. And so all of that intuitively focused on the male executives. But, a year or so later, this was back in 2018 where I wrapped up that work. I was thinking about, what about Susan, who is the executive assistant for this, male executive? She's worked for him for 10 years. And for the first time in 10 years, after he goes through this training, he goes up to her and goes, Susan, how can I help you with your career? Where do you want to go? What can I do? How can I be your support? How can I be your mentor? How can I be your sponsor? And then poor Susan's probably like, where is this coming from? Like, where have you been the last 10 years? What do I do with this, newfound interest in my career journey? And so I kept thinking about, what about poor Susan? There's a whole other side to this ally partnership, and a big theme in the training and in my allyship work since then is that as an ally, you need to do the work that matters most to the individual or the group that you're trying to serve. And you're never going to know what that is if you're not working in partnership with that group or individual. And so, having more emphasis on what I call the partner side of this ally relationship is really important, because there's certain behaviors and responsibilities that partners have too. And I think about one of my allies, a few years ago. He said to me, the only reason I put so much time into you is because you actually do something with it. We talk about stuff and then you go and act, and you take advantage of the opportunities, and you go running for it. He's like, if you weren't doing the stuff, I wouldn't be invested in you as an ally. And so that really stuck with me. And then the second part of your question was that how allyship can help organizations.
Yeah, how do you think that how do you think your approach, or how do you think that shift in mindset might help workplaces move beyond that performative allyship?
Yeah.
I mean, we know workplaces, like, we can all say what we're doing. But again, getting back to that action portion of it that you're talking about, like, what are some of the things that that the workplaces can do?
Yeah. So I like to say treat ally like a verb, not a noun. So an ally is not who you are, it's what you do. I also say don't ever call yourself an ally. Let that term be credited to you by the individual or the group that you're trying to serve. I do a lot of work with an organization called Blacks in IO Psychology. And one of the best moments of my career was talking to the two leaders of that organization. And they told me, you're our ally, right? And that's how you're doing it right, whenever someone tells you that you're being an ally for them. By having that relationship with the person or group you're trying to serve, you can make sure those actions you take are actually aligned with what that individual or group needs. So a performative ally is someone that just says, I'm an ally, maybe post some stuff online, has a rainbow flag hanging up in their office cube or whatever, but they're not actually taking real action to help solve problems for the group that they're trying to serve. And so if we can get more into this relational aspect of allyship, we can ensure that not just allies are acting, but they're acting in the way that's going to really make a difference for that group or individual.
Your explanation of it, because when in the workplace, specifically in the workplace, like, we're all there for the same reason, we're there for the same goal. We're there to support each other in whatever way that we can do that. And I think that the allyship is one of the most important ways that we can support everybody. So thank you for that explanation. So let's talk a little bit about your book. So your new book, Act Like an Ally, Work with an Ally, is almost here. Congratulations to you. I know what it's like to go through the publishing process. Take some time. So congratulations to you. So I imagine it's going to open up a lot of important conversations. What are you hoping it sparks, especially in places where inclusion still feels more like a checkbox than a true commitment?
Yeah. So a big theme of the book, in addition to the fact that allyship is a two-way partnership, is that allyship's also a fluid concept. And so I think a lot about my former business partner. She's a Black woman. And so when people look at us, they think, oh, Victoria must be the ally because she's the white woman. But Certrice has been my ally as, I'm a mother. She's not. She's been my mental health ally. She was my grievance ally when my father passed away. So she's been my ally in so many circumstances, because it's just depends on the context and, who are we at any given moment when it comes to power, status, privilege, being an in group? How can we leverage that to help people who aren't in that group? And then vice versa, right? And so what I'm hoping it sparks in people who read it and in organizations is that, hey, like, there's a place for me in this work. I think a lot of the anti-DEI rhetoric out there right now is a result of people feeling left out of DEI. And so allyship is a really intentional way of inviting people into inclusion work as part of the solution, not part of the problem.
It's allyship absolutely, opens up those conversations and provides that safe space for people to really say, okay, well, now I'm going to explore this. I'm gonna see how I can be an ally, or I'm gonna see how I can support others in there. So yeah, excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I know that, you were talking about your former colleague, and so would you be able to open to maybe sharing a moment from that experience that shifted how you approach or understand allyship?
Yeah, so she was also my cancer ally. So when I found out I had cancer, I needed to take time off work for the surgery and then for recovery. And the fact that she was just so accommodating and, not just take the time off, but also like, I'm going to lead the organization while you're out, and like stepping in as that acting CEO. And so, yeah, giving people that space and time they need away from work to be able to handle whatever, challenge they're facing, stepping up so that person doesn't have to worry about what's going on, right? There's never a concern throughout that process that the company was, you know, in any sort of bad shape. And also just being like, a concerned human and asking like, how's it going, how are you feeling, like having that empathy, having that active listening. She was really great at that as well.
Bring up a really aspect of allyship too. It's not, not solely around, let's say, DEI and those types of initiatives or those types of classification, whatever we want to do with it. It really is, allyship is almost like a whole person type of approach. Where it's, supporting in times of need and supporting in your case, when you were working, and working towards getting better. Yeah, we'll just say that working towards getting better. That you can be an ally in that regard as well. It doesn't have to, revolve solely around DEI, and yeah, that's wonderful. I appreciate that. Also, so you've also shared openly about living with alopecia, which I know has been part of your authenticity journey. So for those navigating visible or invisible differences in the workplace, what's helped you reclaim your identity and step into leadership with more confidence?
Yeah, so for those out there who don't know, alopecia is a condition where you lose your hair. Sometimes you lose like all hair on your entire body. Sometimes it's like patchy hair loss. And last year, I lost about 70% of my hair. So I ended up shaving it off because you can't really hide, there's too many spots to try to cover them up. And something I realized in the alopecia community, especially among women, there's a lot of hiding. There's a lot of covering. There's a lot of, I get one wig and I wear that one wig until it, is fallen and hair's falling out, and then I'll get another wig and that's that, right? And so it's like no one will ever know. I'm never gonna go swimming or on a roller coaster or in a Corvette or anything where the wig could potentially fall off. And it's like this big secret. And I realized very early on, like, I didn't want to approach it like a big secret. I didn't want to feel ashamed of something that I had zero control over. And, I want to even have some fun with it. And so I wear different wigs all the time. And I've been very open about my journey online. I gave a Disrupt HR speech a few months ago where I started off the speech by taking off my wig and throwing it in the audience. And so I'm trying to be a visible alopecia casualty to let others know that they don't have to feel like they need to hide their alopecia. And when it comes to visible and invisible differences in the workplace, I think it's a matter of deciding how much you want to disclose, and that's always a personal decision. I have nothing against the people who don't want anyone to know about their bald head under the wig. Like, that is their own decision to make. But it's deciding how much you want to share and then just owning it, and people really like authenticity, right? And people feel like they can trust you more and disclose more about themselves, be more vulnerable themselves whenever you can bring your authentic self into the workplace. And also this idea of covering, so hiding something about who you are, that takes up a very finite amount of cognitive resources and emotional resources that we have every day. And so if we can just show up to work just as who we are and not worry about hiding things, we could reallocate that energy, those resources into our actual work rather than worrying about covering some aspect of who I am.
It's going to actually refer to the disrupt HR, uh, where you mentioned it, that you just took it off and just was like, this is it, this is me, and that's really the almost like a tribute to your ability to be vulnerable as well. Just to be, I mean, because authenticity and vulnerability, to me, they kind of go hand in hand with each other, because, we all have to put ourselves out there. It's in some regard. Um, you know, but yeah, the ability to be vulnerable always brings me, obviously to Brene Brown, and, the teachings of all of Brene Brown in there. So, yeah, excellent. Thank you. Um, so getting back to allyship a little bit. So there's this pressure sometimes to get it right when it comes to allyship, to always have the right words, the right timing, and that can hold people back from even trying. What would you say to someone who wants to be a better ally, but is afraid of messing up? And is there a mindset shift that helped you or others you worked with?
So I like to say being an ally does not mean always getting it right. Like, you are inevitably going to get it wrong at some point. What matters is when you get it wrong, that you make it right afterwards, right? So quickly apologizing and not doing it again, whatever the thing was. And I talk about that partner role in that as well, like giving grace. I have a whole chapter in the partner book, about the Work with an Ally book, about giving grace and how your ally is going to mess up, but like, if they change their behavior moving forward, like, that's the best we can do, right? You can't expect them to be this perfect saint. And so my advice for those out there who feel stunted by the fear of getting it wrong, just do the thing. Do the thing. And if you're scared, get more partnerships with people who belong to that group, so you can make sure whatever thing you're doing is the right thing, right? And so I know I've asked friends, is this appropriate that I'm wearing all these different wigs? Like, I buy them from a store that's predominantly centered around Black women. Like, am I appropriating something? Like, is this appropriate? And like, I'm always checking in to make sure I'm not, stepping out of bounds whenever it comes to different groups that I don't belong to. So, what was the second part of your question, Kenneth?
Second, is there a mindset shift that's helped you or others you worked with in terms of, approaching allyship, or maybe being afraid to, become an ally because they're afraid of messing up? Was there a mindset shift that maybe you or somebody else that you worked with that has had?
Yeah. So Dolly Chugg has this book, The Person You Mean to Be, and she talks about this concept of being a good-ish person. So we often get stuck in binary thinking. So, like, I'm a good person. You said I did a bad thing, so I'm going to get really defensive and tell you all the reasons why I'm not a bad person and I'm a good person. And we miss the point if we get into that mindset. We get into a place of defensiveness and doubling down. And I tried to explain to someone once why using the word articulate, describing a woman of color that he was working with, is a potential microaggression, because especially in the Black community, the assumption is, oh, if you say you're so articulate, you're assuming that, well, you wouldn't be articulate, right? So like there's a potential microaggression there. And he was just not hearing me. He used the word about 5 more times in the conversation to like let it be known that, he wasn't using it in the wrong way or whatever. And so if you can adopt this idea that I'm a good-ish person, right? I'm trying to be a good person, but sometimes I mess up. And if I mess up, it doesn't make me a bad person. I'm just trying my best and I got it wrong, right? So I don't have to get into this debate whether I'm a good person or not. I can focus on the behavior itself and me as a goodish person. Oh, I messed that up. I'm not going to do that in the future, but I'm not going to like have this philosophical existential crisis that like I'm this bad person now.
Start telling people I'm a good-ish person. I'm not great. I'm just a good-ish person. I try to have good intentions, but that's, yeah, I mean, and that also works into that growth mindset as well, that being open to growth and being open to, so many different things. So many different perspectives, being open to the fact that, failing forward type of mindset. I hate using the word fail, but failing forward to kind of to learn more about, how you can be a better ally. So, and being that it's okay to make mistakes, it's just knowing what to do when you do make those mistakes. So, or acting upon it, like in a positive way. So yeah, we do spend a lot of time within this in this podcast too, talking a lot about as OD professionals, just growth mindset, and that's what I love about that, is the fact that it gives people the understanding that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay, it's just what we do with those mistakes or what's going to be the difference. So yes, I'm moving forward as a good-ish person going. So, all right. So let's zoom out for a moment. So we've been talking about allyship at the individual level, but what does it really look like across a whole organization? So how do we build it into the systems and structures? And for OD professionals working in cultures for OD professionals working in cultures that feel a little stuck, where do you suggest they start?
So I always recommend starting with the data. And the question to ask when it comes to embedding a culture of allyship is who is currently being left out, whether it's who we're hiring, who we're promoting, who's in a high potential pool, who's getting selected for developmental opportunities, who's going to conferences, like who is being left out. And then how can we create fair systems so we could have a good representation of individuals, across these different talent management systems? So, men and women is a pretty easy one. It's like 49, 49, 2 if we consider non-binary as well. But like, you should be able to look up any sort of organizational hierarchy, organizational chart, and see a pretty even split of men and women all the way up through the organization. And as we know, that's not typically the case. You mentioned earlier, only 19% of all CEOs are women. It should be closer to 50, right? And so what type of systems can we build to support the development of women leaders and non-binary leaders so we can start seeing those numbers being represented in the organization? And so this is definitely a very DEI approach, to allyship. I think allyship is just an advanced DEI strategy, in my opinion. But looking at the data, asking why are we seeing it this way? So, we realize it's because we have managers recommending people, and most of our managers belong to a certain demographic. So they're recommending people that look like them. So what if we we open up the call and we have self-nominations instead, and so there's ways that we can try to fix those numbers, but without knowing what the data look like at the beginning of this process, you're kind of going in blind. And so how can you make sure that you're taking data-based decisions for the systems that you do start creating or fixing to result in more equitable outcomes?
You can start all conversations with data. I mean, that's that's it's and you can it, the data can be manipulated, but the data never lies, though. I mean, that's the one thing. I mean, and like you're saying, 49-49-2, that it should be in the workplace 49-49-2, not 1981, or 1980, whatever the case might be. So yeah, absolutely. And like you're saying too, I mean, one of the things that we focus on in my business, and we focus on those structures, we focus on those processes, and we focus on like building these different programs, et cetera, within the workplaces so that they can do some of this work. One of the big things that I tend to focus on is like succession planning. So what does succession planning like for us look like, or for the organizations that I work with look like? And ensuring again that it is inclusive across the organization, not just, oh, I really like this person, like you were saying, I really like this person. I'm going to recommend them, and they look like me, they talk like me, they act like me, they manage like me, they're a leader just like me. So you're basically going to be getting me for this role. So it's, so we definitely look beyond that a little bit too. Not a little bit, a lot of it. So excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, a lot of folks, tuning in are newer to OD. They're learning the frameworks, the models, and trying to stay human through it all. What would you say to someone who's just getting started and wants to hold on to that human connection while learning the technical side of OD?
Really get close with your stakeholders, understand who the end user is, your peers, your leaders, just really understand what their needs are, what their challenges are. I remember when I worked at Amazon, the very first thing I did on the project I was working on was interview as many people as I could who had previously went through the program that I was rebuilding, right? And so like understanding what worked, what didn't, because we're gonna get such better solutions by involving stakeholders than trying to just do it all ourselves.
So excellent. And yeah, and yeah, keeping the people first. I mean, that's what our organizations are all about anyway. It's always people first and people centric. And yeah, excellent. Thank you. So we're going to get down to our last couple of questions here, for you. So, if you can gift every workplace one question, a question they would ask regularly, or they would regularly ask themselves to stay aligned with inclusion, culture, or leadership, what would it be?
So the way I define inclusion is the behaviors that result in others feeling valued, respected, seen, and heard. And so the question would be, do what can I do to make you feel valued, respected, seen, and heard? What am I doing that makes you feel that way? What am I not doing that could make you feel that way? And just having that check-in. And that way you're making it about what's my responsibility, what's my accountability when it comes to workplace inclusion, and learning directly from those who you interact with to see if you're hitting that mark.
That's just the maybe we'll just in the show notes we'll just have that start just with that, like that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And lastly here, so we like to end with something a little reflective. If you had to sum up your approach to work, relationships, or leadership in a single sentence or even a poem or a haiku, and I'm not going to get into the depth of why I choose haiku, but I there's haiku in there. But what might that sound like today?
Wish I had more time.
You know, just keep on going. We can make this episode 4 hours long if you want.
Something along the lines of, there wouldn't be an organization without humans. And so we need to center that human experience to get the most out of any organization. And we can do that by collecting data, having conversations, taking an inclusive design approach to the work, human-centric design. But I think at the end of the day, no, or an organization is only as good as its people within it. And so taking care of your people, understanding your people, building for your people is going to set up that organization for success.
Thank you so much for joining me here today, Dr. V, Dr. Victoria Mattingly. Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. So that's it for today's conversation, and I hope you found it as insightful as I did. These moments where we get to sit down and really talk about the complexities, the wins, the uncertainties of OD are what this podcast is all about. A huge thank you to Dr. Victoria Mattingly for joining us and sharing her story, her wisdom, and her practice with such honesty. If you would like to connect with Dr. V, I will have her contact information in the show notes, and be sure to order her new book. I will have is there a link for that in the, that I can do like pre-orders for?
Yeah, so mattinglysolutions.com/allyship. There's pre-orders up right now, and that will also be where the link for the book when it launches on August 5th.
So I'll make sure that I have that in the show notes as well, so people can pre-order it in there. So, and to you, the listener, thank you. This podcast continues to grow because of your curiosity, your messages, your shares, and your trust in these conversations. If you'd like to learn more about the Flow of Five Tiers, the framework that guides much of my work, you can visit my website at www.pearsonpearson.llc. And if your organization is in need of thoughtful project-based OD consulting, we'd love to support you through Pearson & Pearson LLC. We believe in doing work that's rooted in systems thinking, guided by story, and grounded in the real rhythms of your workplace. Lastly, if you've been listening and thinking, I'd love to be a part of this, I'd love to hear from you. So we're welcoming guests to future episodes. And if you have a perspective or a story to share, please reach out to me at info@pearsonpearson.llc or send me a message on LinkedIn. Until next time, keep showing up with curiosity, keep speaking the stories that matter, and keep unboxing what's possible in your workplace. Take care.